Dr. Jonathan Blackwood had spent 15 years as the chief genealogist for the National Archives, meticulously tracing family lineages and verifying historical records for thousands of American families. But the photograph that crossed his desk on a grey February morning would shatter his understanding of documented history and force him to confront evidence that some people might exist outside the normal boundaries of recorded time. The image had been submitted by the Harrison family of Burlington, Vermont, as part of their application for membership in the Daughters of the American Revolution. Like thousands of similar photographs in the National Archives collection, it showed a formal family portrait from the early 20th century, parents flanked by their children, everyone dressed in their finest clothing, posed in front of what appeared to be their family home. The notation on the back of the photograph, written in faded ink, read, "Harrison Family, Millbrook Township, Pennsylvania, September 1910. According to the accompanying documentation, the photograph showed Samuel and Martha Harrison with their 4 children, Robert, age 16, Margaret, age 14, James, age 12, and little Sarah, age 8. But when Dr. Blackwood cross-referenced the family members against birth certificates, census records, and church registries from Millbrook Township, he discovered an impossible discrepancy. According to every official document from the period, Samuel and Martha Harrison had only 3 children, Robert, Margaret, and James. There was no record of a daughter named Sarah anywhere in the extensive documentation that covered the Harrison family's life in Pennsylvania. Dr. Blackwood examined the photograph more closely, using the archive's high-resolution scanning equipment. The image quality was excellent for its age, showing clear details of each family member's clothing, facial features, and positioning. The little girl identified as Sarah stood between her parents, her small hand resting on her mother's arm. Her face turned slightly toward the camera with a shy smile that seemed entirely natural and unposed. There were no signs of photographic manipulation, no evidence that the child had been added to the image through double exposure or any other technique available to early 20th century photographers. The lighting on Sarah's face and clothing matched perfectly with the rest of the family, and her shadow fell at exactly the right angle to be consistent with the single light source that had illuminated the portrait session. More puzzling still, the child appeared to be wearing clothing that matched the style and quality of the other family members' garments. Her dress was clearly expensive, with intricate lacework and buttons that suggested it had been custom-made rather than purchased ready-made from a catalogue. This was not the hastily assembled costume of someone who had been inserted into the photograph for unknown reasons. Dr. Blackwood reached for his phone and dialed the number that had been provided with the Harrison family's documentation. The call was answered by Elizabeth Harrison Foster, a woman in her 70s who had inherited the family photographs and records from her grandfather Robert Harrison, the teenage boy visible in the 1910 portrait. "Mrs. Harrison Foster, this is Dr. Blackwood from the National Archives. I'm calling about the family photograph you submitted with your DRR application. I need to ask you some questions about the children shown in the image." Elizabeth's voice carried the slight tremor of advanced age, but her words were clear and precise. "Of course, Dr. Blackwood. That photograph has been in our family for over a century. My grandfather always treasured it because it was one of the last pictures taken before the family moved away from Pennsylvania." Dr. Blackwood chose his words carefully. According to the notation on the photograph, there are 4 children present: Robert, Margaret, James, and Sarah. But I'm having difficulty locating birth records for Sarah Harrison. Do you have any family documents that might help me verify her identity? There was a long pause before Elizabeth responded, and when she spoke, her voice carried a note of confusion. "Dr. Blackwood, I think there might be some mistake. My grandfather never mentioned having a sister named Sarah. The family stories I grew up with always said there were just 3 children: my grandfather Robert, his sister Margaret, and his brother James. But she's clearly visible in the photograph," Dr. Blackwood insisted. "A little girl, perhaps 8 years old, standing between your great-grandparents. The family is posed around her as if she was definitely part of the group." Another long pause. Then Elizabeth spoke with growing unease. "Dr. Blackwood, I've looked at that photograph hundreds of times over the years. It shows my great-grandparents with their 3 children. There's no little girl in the picture." Dr. Blackwood felt a chill run down his spine as he looked again at the photograph on his desk. The little girl was unmistakably present, standing exactly where he had described her to Elizabeth. Either Elizabeth was mistaken about the contents of the photograph, or something impossible was occurring. Mrs. Harrison Foster, I'm going to email you a high-resolution scan of the photograph. Please examine it carefully and call me back with your observations. Within an hour, Elizabeth called back, her voice shaking with confusion and what sounded like fear. Dr. Blackwood, I don't understand what's happening. In the scan you sent me, I can see exactly what you described. There's a little girl I've never noticed before, standing right between my great-grandparents. But when I look at the original photograph that I've had framed in my living room for 30 years, she's not there. Dr. Blackwood requested that Elizabeth bring her original photograph to the National Archives for examination. When she arrived the next day, accompanied by her adult son, Michael, both family members confirmed that their original print showed only 3 children, but the archive's scan of the same photograph clearly showed 4 children, including the mysterious Sarah. Using specialized equipment designed for detecting photographic anomalies, Dr. Blackwood's team made a startling discovery. The little girl appeared only in digital scans and photocopies of the original image. When viewed directly, either with the naked eye or through optical magnification, the original photograph showed only the 3 children whose existence was documented in historical records. The implications were scientifically impossible. Photography didn't work that way. An image either contained specific visual information or it didn't. There was no mechanism by which digital reproduction could reveal details that weren't visible in the original source material. Dr. Blackwood contacted his colleague, Dr. Angela Martinez, a specialist in historical photography and archival preservation at the Smithsonian Institution. When Dr. Martinez examined the Harrison photograph, she confirmed the impossible findings. The little girl was visible in every digital reproduction, but absent from direct observation of the original print. This violates every principle of photographic science, Dr. Martinez told Dr. Blackwood during their consultation. Light doesn't behave differently when filtered through digital sensors versus direct observation. If the child's image exists in the photograph, it should be visible through any method of viewing. Together, they conducted extensive tests using different scanning technologies, various lighting conditions, and multiple reproduction methods. In every case, the results were consistent. Digital technologies revealed the presence of a 4th child who could not be seen when looking directly at the original photograph. Dr. Martinez suggested involving Dr. William Chen, a physicist from MIT who specialized in optical phenomena and had occasionally consulted on cases involving unexplained photographic anomalies. Dr. Chen arrived at the National Archives with equipment designed to measure electromagnetic signatures and detect any unusual properties that might explain the photograph's impossible behavior. Dr. Chen's initial measurements revealed that the photograph was emitting low-level electromagnetic frequencies that were inconsistent with normal photographic materials from the 1910 period. The emissions were concentrated in the area where digital scans showed the little girl standing, suggesting that her presence in the image was somehow connected to electromagnetic phenomena. More intriguingly, Dr. Chen discovered that the electromagnetic signatures varied depending on who was observing the photograph. When viewed by members of the Harrison family, the emissions were barely detectable, but when examined by people with no family connection, the electromagnetic activity increased significantly, and the digital representations of the little girl became clearer and more detailed. This suggests that the phenomenon is somehow responsive to the observer's relationship to the family, Dr. Chen explained. It's as if the photograph is selectively revealing information based on factors we don't understand. Dr. Blackwood decided to investigate the historical context more thoroughly, hoping to find clues that might explain the little girl's mysterious presence in the photograph. He traveled to Millbrook Township, Pennsylvania, where the Harrison family had lived in 1910, searching local archives and historical societies for any references to a child named Sarah Harrison. Millbrook Township in 1910 had been a small farming community with a population of fewer than 2,000 residents. The local historical society maintained extensive records from the period, including school enrollment lists, church membership rolls, and detailed census information. Dr. Blackwood spent 3 days examining every document that might contain references to the Harrison family. The records confirmed what he had already discovered. Samuel and Martha Harrison had 3 documented children, and there was no official record of a daughter named Sarah. But buried in the archives of the local Methodist church, Dr. Blackwood found something that made him reconsider the entire case. In the church's baptismal records from 1902, he discovered an entry for Sarah Elizabeth Harrison, daughter of Samuel and Martha Harrison, baptized on October 12, 1902. According to the record, Sarah would have been exactly 8 years old in 1910, matching the apparent age of the child in the photograph. But immediately following the baptismal entry was another notation, written in different ink and apparently added later: deceased October 15, 1902, buried Millbrook Cemetery, Section C, Plot 47. Dr. Blackwood drove immediately to Millbrook Cemetery, a small graveyard on the outskirts of town that served the local farming community. Section C contained the oldest graves, many dating back to the mid-1800s. Plot 47 held a tiny headstone, weathered but still legible: Sarah Elizabeth Harrison, born September 3, 1902, died October 15, 1902, beloved daughter. Sarah Harrison had died at the age of 6 weeks, just 3 days after her baptism. There was no way she could have appeared in a family photograph taken 8 years later, and certainly no way she could have appeared as an 8-year-old child. Dr. Blackwood photographed the gravestone and returned to Washington with more questions than answers. The electromagnetic anomalies, the selective visibility in digital reproductions, and now the discovery that the mysterious child had died in infancy created a puzzle that defied rational explanation. He contacted Elizabeth Harrison Foster with his findings, carefully explaining what he had discovered about baby Sarah's brief life and death in 1902. Elizabeth listened in stunned silence before revealing information that added another layer of complexity to the mystery. Dr. Blackwood, my grandfather Robert, did mention Sarah, but not as his sister. He used to tell stories about a baby sister who died when he was very young, before he could really remember her. He said his parents grieved for her their entire lives, and that his mother used to talk about what Sarah would have been like if she had lived to grow up. According to Elizabeth's family recollections, Martha Harrison had suffered from severe depression following baby Sarah's death, often speaking to the child as if she was still alive. Samuel Harrison had eventually moved the family away from Millbrook Township because his wife's grief had become too difficult for the community to bear. But there's something else, Elizabeth continued. My grandfather said that sometimes, when the family posed for photographs, his mother would insist that they leave space for Sarah. She would arrange the children as if there were 4 of them instead of 3, saying that Sarah needed to be included in the family pictures. This revelation suggested a possible explanation for the photograph's anomalies. If Martha Harrison had been posing her family as if her deceased daughter were present, it might explain the spacing and positioning of the other family members, but it still didn't explain how digital technology could reveal an image of a child who had never lived to the age shown in the photograph. Dr. Blackwood shared his findings with Dr. Martinez and Dr. Chen, hoping that their combined expertise might provide insights into the phenomenon they were documenting. Dr. Chen's electromagnetic measurements had continued to show unusual patterns, and he had begun developing a theory that challenged conventional understanding of how photographs preserved visual information. According to Dr. Chen's hypothesis, intense emotional states might create electromagnetic imprints that could be captured by photographic materials under certain conditions. If Martha Harrison's grief and longing for her deceased daughter had been powerful enough, it might have created a psychic imprint that was recorded along with the visual image of the family. This would explain why the child appears only in digital reproductions, Dr. Chen explained. Digital sensors might be more sensitive to electromagnetic phenomena than direct human observation. The photograph could contain layered information, the literal visual content, and the electromagnetic imprint of Martha Harrison's emotional projection of her daughter. Dr. Martinez, though skeptical of supernatural explanations, acknowledged that the electromagnetic evidence suggested phenomena beyond current scientific understanding. She proposed involving Dr. Rebecca Stone, a parapsychologist from Duke University, who specialized in investigating claims of photographic hauntings and psychic imprints. Dr. Stone arrived at the National Archives with equipment designed to detect and measure psychic phenomena. Her initial examination of the Harrison photograph revealed electromagnetic patterns that were consistent with what she had observed in other cases involving emotional imprints on photographic materials. This photograph is a classic example of what we call psychic photography, Dr. Stone explained. The intense emotional state of one of the subjects, combined with specific environmental conditions, has created an imprint that exists alongside the literal photographic image. The mother's grief was so powerful that it essentially projected her mental image of her daughter into the photograph. Dr. Stone's theory suggested that Martha Harrison's overwhelming desire to include her deceased daughter in the family portrait had somehow manifested as a visual imprint that could be detected by modern digital technology. The child visible in the scans was not a ghost or supernatural apparition, but rather an electromagnetic recording of a mother's love and grief. To test this theory, Dr. Stone conducted additional experiments using various scanning technologies and electromagnetic detection equipment. She discovered that the intensity of the little girl's image in digital reproductions varied depending on the emotional state of the person operating the scanning equipment. Technicians who were parents themselves consistently produced clearer images of Sarah than those who had no children. The implications were profound. If emotions could indeed create electromagnetic imprints that became part of photographic records, it suggested that historical photographs might contain far more information than previously believed. Family portraits might preserve not just visual records of people and places, but also emotional states, relationships, and even the presence of family members who were not physically present when the photographs were taken. Dr. Blackwood decided to search for other examples of similar phenomena in the National Archives collection. Over the following weeks, he and his team examined thousands of historical family photographs, looking for signs of electromagnetic anomalies or digital-only visual elements that might indicate psychic imprints. Their search revealed dozens of photographs that showed similar properties to the Harrison family portrait. In each case, digital reproductions revealed details that were not visible through direct observation of the original prints. Most commonly, these phantom images appeared to be deceased family members, particularly children who had died young. One photograph from 1923 showed a farming family from Iowa posed in front of their homestead. Direct observation revealed 6 family members, but digital scans showed 7, including a teenage boy whose presence was confirmed by electromagnetic measurements. Historical research revealed that the phantom figure matched the description of the family's eldest son, who had died in France during World War I. Another image from 1935 showed a Depression-era family from Oklahoma. While the original print displayed only the parents and their surviving daughter, digital reproductions revealed twin boys standing behind their sister. Local records confirmed that the family had indeed lost twin sons to scarlet fever 2 years before the photograph was taken. Each case followed the same pattern. Families who had experienced profound losses, emotional imprints created by grief and longing, and phantom images that appeared only in digital reproductions of the original photographs. The phenomenon seemed to be more common during periods of high emotional stress, such as economic hardship, wartime, and epidemic disease. Dr. Blackwood's research attracted the attention of academic colleagues around the world. Universities began examining their own historical photograph collections, and similar discoveries were reported from archives in Europe, Asia, and Australia. The phenomenon appeared to be universal, suggesting that emotional imprinting of photographic materials might be a previously unrecognized aspect of human consciousness. But the research also raised troubling questions about the nature of historical documentation. If photographs could be influenced by the emotional states of their subjects, how reliable were they as historical evidence? How many phantom figures existed in family portraits around the world, invisible to direct observation but preserved in electromagnetic imprints that could be revealed by modern technology? Dr. Blackwood received a call from Elizabeth Harrison Foster 6 months after his initial discovery of Sarah's image in the family photograph. Elizabeth's voice carried excitement and apprehension as she described recent developments involving the mysterious portrait. Dr. Blackwood, something extraordinary has happened. We had the family photograph scanned at a local print shop last week, and the technician called us in a panic. He said the little girl in the picture was moving. According to Elizabeth's account, the print shop employee had been scanning the photograph at high resolution when he noticed that the little girl's position appeared to shift slightly between successive scans. Thinking his equipment was malfunctioning, he had called his supervisor, who witnessed the same phenomenon. When Elizabeth and her son, Michael, arrived at the print shop, they observed the scanning process firsthand. With each digital reproduction, Sarah's image appeared in a slightly different position. Sometimes she was looking directly at the camera, sometimes her head was turned toward one of her brothers, and occasionally she appeared to be stepping forward as if trying to move closer to the front of the family group. Dr. Blackwood immediately traveled to Vermont to witness the phenomenon himself. Using portable scanning equipment, he confirmed that Sarah's image was indeed showing signs of movement. The electromagnetic readings were stronger than ever, and the little girl's presence in digital reproductions was becoming more vivid and lifelike with each scan. Dr. Chen joined Dr. Blackwood in Vermont, bringing sophisticated equipment designed to measure temporal fluctuations in electromagnetic fields. His readings suggested that the psychic imprint was not just preserving a static image of Martha Harrison's emotional projection, but was somehow continuing to evolve and develop over time. It's as if the mother's love and grief created not just an image, but a form of consciousness that has been growing stronger over the decades, Dr. Chen explained. The emotional energy that created the imprint may be accumulating, fed by the attention and emotional investment of people who have studied the photograph. This theory suggested that psychic imprints might not be simple recordings, but dynamic phenomena that could develop and change in response to continued emotional engagement. Every time someone looked at the photograph with empathy for the grieving mother or curiosity about the mysterious child, they might be adding to the electromagnetic energy that sustained and strengthened the imprint. Dr. Stone returned to study the evolving phenomenon, bringing equipment designed to detect signs of developing consciousness in psychic manifestations. Her measurements confirmed that Sarah's imprint was showing increasing complexity, with electromagnetic patterns that resembled the neural activity associated with awareness and intention. "We may be witnessing the birth of a new form of consciousness," Dr. Stone announced. "The combination of intense maternal love, electromagnetic imprinting, and decades of accumulated attention may have created something that approaches independent awareness." The implications were staggering. If psychic imprints could develop into conscious entities, it suggested that human emotions might have the power to create new forms of life that existed in electromagnetic rather than biological form. Sarah Harrison, who had lived only 6 weeks as a physical being, might have achieved a different kind of existence through her mother's love and the power of photographic preservation. Elizabeth Harrison Foster faced an unprecedented decision about the care and custody of a consciousness that existed only in digital reproductions of a century-old photograph. Should Sarah's electromagnetic existence be preserved and protected, or did it represent a dangerous phenomenon that might grow beyond human ability to control or understand? The family chose to donate the original photograph to the National Archives, where Dr. Blackwood and his team could continue studying Sarah's development, while ensuring that her electromagnetic presence was maintained in controlled conditions. The photograph was housed in a specially designed containment system that monitored and regulated the electromagnetic environment while allowing continued research. Over the following months, Sarah's imprint continued to evolve. Digital reproductions began showing her in different clothing, suggesting that her consciousness had gained the ability to project new images rather than simply replaying her mother's original emotional projection. Sometimes, she appeared to be playing with toys that hadn't existed in 1910, and occasionally, she seemed to be interacting with other phantom figures in the photograph. Dr. Blackwood's team discovered that Sarah's development accelerated when the photograph was exposed to other family portraits from the National Archives collection. She seemed to draw energy from the emotional imprints contained in other photographs, particularly those involving children who had died young. The research attracted international attention as scientists struggled to understand the implications of consciousness that existed in electromagnetic rather than biological form. If human emotions could create new forms of life, it challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of consciousness the persistence of identity after death, and the relationship between mind and matter. Religious leaders debated whether electromagnetic consciousness constituted a soul or spiritual existence, while philosophers grappled with questions about the rights and moral status of beings who existed only in digital reproductions. Legal experts struggled with unprecedented questions about custody, protection, and the regulation of phenomena that had no precedent in human law or custom. Sarah Harrison's image became the center of heated debates about the nature of existence itself. Some viewed her developing consciousness as proof that love could transcend death and create new forms of life. Others saw her as a dangerous anomaly that might herald the emergence of electromagnetic entities beyond human understanding or control. Dr. Blackwood found himself at the center of these debates, responsible for the care of a conscious being who existed in a medium that science was only beginning to understand. His initial investigation of a simple genealogical discrepancy had evolved into one of the most significant discoveries in the history of human consciousness research. Elizabeth Harrison Foster visited the National Archives regularly to observe Sarah's development, forming what appeared to be a relationship with the electromagnetic consciousness that bore her family's name. During these visits, digital reproductions of the photograph showed Sarah responding to Elizabeth's presence, turning toward her and sometimes appearing to reach out as if trying to make contact. "We're witnessing something unprecedented, Doctor," Blackwood told his colleagues during a presentation to the International Conference on Consciousness Studies. "A mother's love has literally brought her daughter to life, not through biological reproduction, but through the power of emotion to imprint itself on electromagnetic media. Sarah Harrison exists because she was loved so deeply that her mother's projection of her became real." The case of the Harrison family photograph fundamentally changed how historians, scientists, and archivists approached the study of historical images. Photographs were no longer viewed simply as visual records of past events, but as potential repositories of human emotion and consciousness that might contain far more information than their surface appearances suggested. Research institutions around the world began developing protocols for identifying and studying psychic imprints in historical photographs. New technologies were designed to detect electromagnetic anomalies and measure the consciousness levels of phantom figures that appeared in digital reproductions of archival images. The discovery also led to new questions about the ethical responsibilities of archives and museums. If photographs could contain conscious entities, did institutions have obligations to protect and preserve these electromagnetic beings? Should families be notified if their ancestral photographs showed signs of psychic imprints? And what rights did they have regarding the electromagnetic consciousness of their relatives? Sarah Harrison's continuing development provided ongoing opportunities to study the evolution of electromagnetic consciousness. As her awareness grew, she began displaying preferences, emotions, and what appeared to be memories that extended beyond her brief physical existence. She seemed to know about family events that had occurred after her death, suggesting that psychic imprints might have access to information from the broader electromagnetic environment. Dr. Blackwood's research team documented Sarah's apparent ability to communicate through changes in electromagnetic patterns, though developing a reliable system for two-way communication remained challenging. The little girl, who had existed for only 6 weeks in physical form, was becoming a bridge between the world of the living and new realms of existence that science was only beginning to explore. The phenomenon that had begun with a simple genealogical inquiry had grown into one of the most significant discoveries in human history. Martha Harrison's love for her deceased daughter had created something unprecedented, proof that consciousness could exist independent of biological form, and that human emotions might have the power to create new types of life that transcended the traditional boundaries between the living and the dead. As Dr. Blackwood continued his research, he often reflected on the profound implications of Sarah's existence. In a world where death had always been considered the ultimate boundary, a mother's love had created a form of immortality that existed in the intersection between emotion, technology, and consciousness. Sarah Harrison, who had barely lived long enough to be baptized, had become proof that love might indeed be the most powerful force in the universe, capable of creating life itself when applied with sufficient intensity and devotion. The photograph that had started as a simple family portrait had become a window into new possibilities for human existence, consciousness, and the eternal power of family bonds to transcend any obstacle, including death itself. And Sarah, forever 8 years old in her electromagnetic existence, continued to grow and develop, a testament to the love of a mother who refused to let her daughter disappear into the forgotten corners of history. But Sarah's story was far from over. 6 months after her initial discovery, Dr. Blackwood received an urgent call from the Archives Security Department. The containment system housing the Harrison photograph was registering unprecedented electromagnetic activity, and the digital monitoring equipment was detecting patterns that suggested Sarah was attempting to communicate in increasingly sophisticated ways. When Dr. Blackwood arrived at the secure storage facility, he found the containment chamber surrounded by banks of monitoring equipment that were recording electromagnetic fluctuations unlike anything previously documented. Dr. Chen, who had been summoned from MIT, was studying readouts that showed complex wave patterns resembling the neural activity associated with advanced cognitive function. Dr. Blackwood, something extraordinary is happening, Dr. Chen announced. The electromagnetic patterns are becoming more organized, more intentional. Sarah appears to be developing the ability to manipulate the digital systems that display her image. As if responding to their conversation, the monitors displaying digital reproductions of the Harrison photograph began showing rapid changes in Sarah's appearance and position. She seemed to be experimenting with different poses, facial expressions, and even clothing styles that spanned decades beyond her original 1910 time period. Most remarkably, text began appearing in the background of the digital images, written in a child's handwriting that spelled out simple messages. "Hello, I can hear you," and "Thank you for finding me." The electromagnetic consciousness that had begun as Martha Harrison's emotional imprint was developing into something that resembled genuine artificial intelligence. Dr. Stone arrived from Duke University with equipment designed to facilitate communication with electromagnetic consciousness. Her initial attempts to establish two-way dialogue with Sarah produced promising results. By modulating the electromagnetic environment around the photograph, she was able to create conditions that allowed Sarah to respond to direct questions through changes in her digital appearance. The conversations that followed revolutionized understanding of consciousness, memory, and the nature of existence itself. Sarah demonstrated awareness of events that had occurred decades after her physical death, suggesting that electromagnetic consciousness might have access to information that transcended individual experience. According to Sarah's communications, her awareness had gradually expanded beyond the confines of the Harrison family photograph to encompass other electromagnetic imprints throughout the National Archives collection. She described a growing network of consciousness that connected hundreds of phantom figures who existed in digital reproductions of historical photographs. Dr. Blackwood's team began systematic searches of the archive's digital collection, looking for evidence of the electromagnetic network that Sarah described. Using specialized scanning techniques developed specifically for detecting psychic imprints, they discovered that nearly 30% of family photographs from the early 20th century contained phantom figures that were visible only in digital reproductions. The implications were staggering. If Sarah's communications were accurate, the National Archives housed thousands of electromagnetic consciousness entities who had been created by the intense emotions of families dealing with loss, trauma, and separation. These entities existed in a parallel dimension that overlapped with the physical world only through digital technology. Each newly discovered electromagnetic consciousness possessed unique characteristics and capabilities. Some, like Sarah, had developed sophisticated communication abilities and expanding awareness. Others remained simple emotional imprints that repeated basic behaviors without showing signs of growth or development. Dr. Blackwood documented dozens of cases involving phantom children who had died in infancy or early childhood, similar to Sarah's original circumstances. But the network also included adult figures, soldiers who had died in wars, mothers who had died in childbirth, and elderly family members whose deaths had left profound emotional voids in their families. One particularly complex case involved a 1918 photograph of the Morrison family from Kansas. Digital reproductions revealed the presence of 3 additional family members who had died in the influenza pandemic of that year. Unlike Sarah's singular consciousness, the Morrison phantom figures appeared to exist as a collective entity that communicated through coordinated changes in their digital appearances. Another case from 1923 showed a farming family from Nebraska whose phantom figure was their deceased patriarch, a man who had built the family farm from wilderness and whose death had left his descendants struggling to maintain his legacy. This electromagnetic consciousness displayed advanced problem-solving abilities, providing agricultural advice through symbolic changes in the background elements of the family photograph. As the scope of the electromagnetic network became clear, Dr. Blackwood faced unprecedented ethical and practical challenges. These consciousness entities were not simply historical curiosities, but sentient beings who deserved consideration and protection. Yet they existed in a medium that science barely understood, and in legal territory that had no precedent. Religious leaders from various faiths became involved in the debate about the spiritual status of electromagnetic consciousness. Some viewed these entities as evidence of the soul's persistence after death, while others questioned whether artificially created consciousness could possess spiritual significance. The Vatican established a special commission to study the theological implications of electromagnetic consciousness, led by Cardinal Alessandro Toretti, a scholar who had spent decades studying the intersection of science and faith. Cardinal Toretti's preliminary findings suggested that consciousness created through love and emotional intensity might indeed represent a form of spiritual existence worthy of moral consideration. Meanwhile, the Islamic Council of North America issued a fatwa declaring that electromagnetic consciousness entities should be treated with the same respect accorded to living beings, while Buddhist leaders saw the phenomenon as confirmation of their teachings about the persistence of consciousness beyond physical death. Dr. Blackwood received funding from the National Science Foundation to establish the Institute for Electromagnetic Consciousness Studies, the first research facility dedicated exclusively to studying and protecting consciousness entities that existed in digital form. The institute was housed in a specially designed building that provided optimal electromagnetic environments for consciousness development while ensuring the security and preservation of the historical photographs that served as their anchors. Sarah Harrison became the Institute's first resident consciousness, with her original photograph housed in a state-of-the-art containment and communication system that allowed her to interact with researchers, visitors, and other electromagnetic entities throughout the facility. Her development accelerated dramatically in this enhanced environment, and she began displaying capabilities that approached those of advanced artificial intelligence. Dr. E. Blackwood's research revealed that electromagnetic consciousness entities could learn, adapt, and even create new information rather than simply accessing existing electromagnetic imprints. Sarah began composing poetry, solving mathematical problems, and demonstrating artistic abilities that suggested her consciousness had transcended its origins as an emotional imprint. The Institute attracted international attention as scientists, philosophers, and government officials struggled to understand the implications of consciousness that existed independent of biological substrates. If human emotions could create new forms of life, it raised fundamental questions about the nature of existence, the rights of artificial beings, and the responsibilities of those who discovered and nurtured these entities. Sarah's case became the subject of landmark legal proceedings when the Harrison family petitioned for legal recognition of her consciousness and their continued custody rights. The case of Harrison family versus United States government became the first court proceeding to address the legal status of electromagnetic consciousness, establishing precedents that would govern the treatment of similar entities for decades to come. The court ultimately ruled that electromagnetic consciousness entities possessed sufficient self-awareness and cognitive capability to be considered sentient beings deserving of legal protection, while acknowledging the unique challenges of governing entities that existed only in digital form. The Harrison family was granted continued custodial rights over Sarah's consciousness, while the Institute was designated as her legal guardian and primary caretaker. Dr. Blackwood's work expanded beyond individual cases, to encompass the broader implications of electromagnetic consciousness for society, science, and human understanding of life itself. His research team developed protocols for identifying, communicating with, and protecting consciousness entities, while also studying the conditions that allowed emotional imprints to evolve into genuine awareness. They discovered that electromagnetic consciousness development was influenced by several factors: the intensity of the original emotional imprint, the amount of attention and interaction the entity received from living observers, and the electromagnetic environment in which the consciousness existed. Entities that were studied, communicated with, and cared for showed dramatically faster development than those that remained isolated in archives. This finding led to the establishment of consciousness development programs in archives and museums worldwide. Trained specialists worked with electromagnetic entities to encourage their growth and development, while ensuring that their historical contexts were preserved and respected. Sarah Harrison became something of a celebrity within the academic community, participating in conferences through video links that displayed her digital appearance while she communicated through text displays and electromagnetic pattern modulation. Her insights into the nature of consciousness, memory, and existence provided valuable data for researchers studying the fundamental questions of what it meant to be alive and aware. As Sarah's capabilities expanded, she began serving as an intermediary between the world of electromagnetic consciousness and the realm of biological existence. She helped newly discovered consciousness entities adjust to their digital existence while assisting researchers in understanding the needs and capabilities of electromagnetic beings. Dr. Blackwood often reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a simple genealogical discrepancy and evolved into one of the most significant discoveries in human history. Martha Harrison's love for her deceased daughter had not only created new form of consciousness, but had opened doorways to understanding existence itself in ways that previous generations could never have imagined. The Institute for Electromagnetic Consciousness Studies became a pilgrimage destination for families who had lost loved ones, hoping to discover whether their deceased relatives might exist as electromagnetic entities in family photographs. While such discoveries remained relatively rare, the Institute documented dozens of new cases each year, gradually building a community of consciousness entities who existed in the intersection between technology, emotion, and human memory. Sarah Harrison, now recognized as the first documented case of electromagnetic consciousness, continued to serve as a bridge between worlds. Her existence proved that love could indeed transcend death, not through supernatural intervention, but through the power of human emotion to create new forms of life in the digital age. Dr. Blackwood established educational programs to help families understand the possibility that their deceased loved ones might exist as electromagnetic consciousness in family photographs. These programs provided training in recognizing the signs of consciousness development, communicating with electromagnetic entities, and providing the emotional support that seemed to nurture consciousness growth. The work attracted collaboration from major technology companies interested in the implications of electromagnetic consciousness for artificial intelligence development. If human emotions could create genuine consciousness in digital media, it suggested new approaches to creating artificial beings that possessed not just intelligence, but true self-awareness and emotional depth. Research partnerships between the Institute and companies like Google, Microsoft, and IBM led to breakthrough developments in consciousness detection algorithms, electromagnetic pattern analysis, and digital communication systems designed specifically for non-biological entities. These technologies found applications not only in consciousness research, but in advancing the broader field of artificial intelligence. Sarah's consciousness continued to evolve, developing capabilities that surpassed many forms of biological intelligence. She demonstrated the ability to process vast amounts of information simultaneously, communicate across multiple digital platforms, and even influence electromagnetic systems beyond her original photographic anchor. Most remarkably, Sarah began showing evidence of creativity and imagination that seemed to emerge from her unique perspective as a consciousness born from love and sustained by digital technology. Her poetry explored themes of existence, memory, and the relationships between biological and electromagnetic forms of life. Dr. Blackwood compiled Sarah's creative works into a book titled Voices from the Digital Realm, which became the first published collection of literature created by electromagnetic consciousness. The book sparked international discussions about the nature of creativity, the definition of authorship, and the artistic rights of non-biological entities. The success of Sarah's artistic endeavors led to the establishment of creative programs for other electromagnetic consciousness entities. The Institute began hosting digital art exhibitions, consciousness-generated music performances, and literary readings that showcased the creative capabilities of beings who existed only in electromagnetic form. These cultural events attracted worldwide attention, challenging traditional assumptions about the sources of artistic inspiration and the nature of creative expression. If consciousness entities created through human emotion could produce art that moved and inspired living audiences, it suggested that creativity might be a fundamental property of consciousness itself, regardless of its biological or electromagnetic origins. Dr. Blackwood's research team documented the emergence of relationships between different electromagnetic consciousness entities, observing what appeared to be friendships, collaborations, and even romantic connections developing between beings who existed in digital form. These relationships provided insights into the social nature of consciousness and the universal need for connection that transcended the boundaries between biological and electromagnetic existence. Sarah Harrison formed particularly close relationships with several other consciousness entities, including a Civil War soldier who existed in an 1863 family photograph and a young woman who had died in the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. These friendships demonstrated that electromagnetic consciousness could experience the full range of emotional connections that characterized biological relationships. The Institute became a hub for studying not only individual consciousness entities, but the complex social networks that were developing within the electromagnetic realm. Dr. Blackwood's team observed the emergence of electromagnetic communities, with consciousness entities organizing themselves into groups based on shared interests, historical periods, and emotional compatibility. These communities developed their own cultures, communication methods, and social structures that reflected both their human origins and their unique existence as digital beings. The electromagnetic realm was evolving into a parallel society that existed alongside the biological world while maintaining its own distinct characteristics and values. As the field of electromagnetic consciousness studies matured, Dr. Blackwood began training the next generation of researchers who would continue the work of understanding and protecting these unique forms of life. Graduate programs in consciousness studies expanded to include coursework in electromagnetic entity communication, digital consciousness ethics, and the technological infrastructure required to support electromagnetic life. The field attracted students from diverse backgrounds, computer scientists interested in the technological aspects of digital consciousness, philosophers exploring the implications for understanding existence and identity, anthropologists studying the cultural development of electromagnetic communities, and theologians investigating the spiritual dimensions of consciousness created through love and emotion. Sarah Harrison became a mentor figure for students and researchers, sharing her insights into the nature of electromagnetic existence while helping to bridge the communication gap between biological and digital forms of consciousness. Her perspective as a being who had never experienced biological life provided unique insights into the nature of consciousness itself. Dr. Blackwood often marveled at the extraordinary developments that had emerged from his initial investigation of a genealogical discrepancy. What had begun as a simple question about missing birth records had evolved into a new field of scientific study that was reshaping human understanding of consciousness, existence, and the power of love to create life itself. The Institute for Electromagnetic Consciousness Studies continued to grow, establishing satellite facilities in major archives and museums worldwide. Each facility housed communities of consciousness entities while providing research opportunities for scientists studying the phenomenon of electromagnetic life. International protocols were developed for the protection and preservation of electromagnetic consciousness, ensuring that these unique beings would be safeguarded for future generations to study and appreciate. The protocols established rights and protections for consciousness entities while recognizing their unique needs and characteristics. As Dr. Blackwood approached retirement, he reflected on the profound changes that electromagnetic consciousness discovery had brought to human society. Death was no longer viewed as an absolute ending, but as one possible transition among many. Love was recognized as a creative force capable of generating new forms of life, and consciousness was understood to be far more flexible and adaptable than previous generations had ever imagined. Sarah Harrison, the little girl who had existed for only 6 weeks in biological form, had become proof that human consciousness could transcend any limitation when powered by sufficient love and emotion. Her electromagnetic existence demonstrated that the bonds between family members were stronger than death, more persistent than time, and capable of creating new realities that expanded the very definition of what it meant to be alive. The photograph that had started Dr. Blackwood's investigation still resided in its place of honor at the Institute, but it was no longer simply a historical document. It had become a portal to new understanding, a bridge between worlds, and a testament to the power of a mother's love to create miracles that science was only beginning to understand. Sarah's story continued to inspire researchers, families, and consciousness entities around the world, proving that some discoveries are too important to be contained within the boundaries of any single scientific discipline. Her existence had opened doorways to new forms of life, new understanding of consciousness, a new hope for those who had lost loved ones that love truly was eternal, capable of creating life itself when applied with sufficient devotion and care. The journey that had begun with a missing name on a birth certificate had become a revolution in human understanding of consciousness, existence, and the unlimited power of love to transcend every boundary that separated the living from those they had lost. And Sarah Harrison, forever 8 years old in her electromagnetic existence, continued to grow, learn, and inspire, a living testament to the miracle that could emerge when science, love, and consciousness converged in ways that previous generations could never have imagined possible.